Impa,
Awesome.
thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm stoked. Like, I'm really excited for this. Let's roll for 20 or 30 minutes. I won't keep you too long. I know you're busy, but let's do this. Normally I don't do a big intro. But I'd love for you, maybe just give us a quick intro for those that don't know Impa. Give us a 30-second, the 30-second elevator pitch. Who is Impa?
Hey, appreciate you having me on. My name is Impa Kasanganay. I live here in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Blessed and beautiful family, and I fight professionally. I fight in the UFC. I'm a middleweight, and I'm honored to do what I love. So appreciate you having me on. And also the Hickory area with Lenore Ryan. So go Bears.
Yeah, no kidding. We're going to talk about that for sure. So I want to give a quick little bit of background because some of this you might not even know, Impa. So the way that I was introduced to you, and for those that didn't catch it, Impa fights. He's got a contract with UFC, so he's fighting within the UFC right now. The way that I found out about you was I was watching a UFC fight a couple months back, maybe. I think it was maybe your first fight after the Contender Series, which we'll talk about here in a second. And we're just watching the fight. And, first of all, you're a pretty imposing guy. So when you come out, people take notice, at least I did. And my wife did and my son did. And then they said that you train in Gastonia, North Carolina, and that you played football for Lenore Ryan, which for those that don't know, I'm in Hickory, North Carolina. You're in Charlotte. Lenore Ryan I could walk to Lenore Ryan right now. I mean, that's how close we are. So we immediately became fans. And then I texted a buddy of both of ours, Jonathan Stamey, who Jonathan owns and operates a combat fighting gym called Atlantic MMA, and also a production company called Fight For It. And I texted Jonathan. I said, "Who is Impa? Who is this guy?" And then he said, "Yeah, he's a local kid. He played football for LR." So I want to ask you were a football player for LR. How do you make what happened? What introduced you to the sport, to the combat fighting sports?
So it kind of started when I was a real little kid, actually. So I've never trained. So my first was the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa. And I never really grew up playing any sports or anything like that. It wasn't like I got into it, but I've always loved watching fighting. I loved watching boxing. And it started from a project when I was a kid. I was in elementary school. We had to pick somebody on a project, like the same birthday month as us or the same birthday. I was researching, landed on Muhammad Ali. We have the same birthday, January 17th. And I was like, cool, who's that? And where my parents are from, that's where the Rumble in the Jungle was. So my dad was telling me the history of it. And ever since that day, it was like, I wanted to do it. I asked my mom, I said, hey, can I box? She said, no, unless you can pay for it. Unless you can pay for it on your own, that's when you'll get to do it. So over time, I've always kind of watched it. My parents didn't like me watching like fighting things. They thought it was too violent for a little kid to watch. So I watch it, and then when they were coming in the room, I'd switch the channel back to Discovery Channel or something. But I've always had that love for just combat. I thought I was going to go military. I wanted to fight somehow. When I was getting into accounting, which I studied at LR, I was like, maybe I could do some underground fighting or some bare knuckle fighting when I'm doing accounting if I can't find MMA. It was just something I always was drawn to. When I got to LR, I was sitting in my dorm watching fights on TV, and it was summer, summer training for football. So I was landscaping at LR. It's like a campus job that you're doing in college. And I was working at Old Hickory Station at the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there, I was thinking all these NFL players are getting better at football by training mixed martial arts, boxing, some kind of combat art. And for me, I was like, oh, I can pay for it on my own now, like Mom said. So it's kind of clicked in my brain. I found Mr. Stamey at Atlantic MMA. And I told him, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to get better at this. And then after the first time ever stepping on the mats, I'm like, no, this is what I need to do for the rest of my life. So that's kind of how I got into it.
So when did you come over to the United States?
Actually, I was the first person in my family born in the United States. My dad was the first one to leave Congo. And I was born in South Florida. So I was born in Fort Lauderdale, moved to North Carolina, finishing the second half of 8th grade like that. After winter break, we moved to North Carolina, and then ended up going to Piedmont Middle School for a little bit, just that last half of the year. Then I started my high school at Providence Senior High in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Which has always had a really good football program, I know.
Yeah, except for when I played.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we didn't do too well. but they've always been pretty well.
It wasn't your fault though. We'll just blame it on everybody else. When
No
did you get
problem.
introduced? When did you start playing football?
My senior year of high school. So I got
Wait, hold on. You didn't start playing football until your senior year of high school.
Yes, sir.
And then you got a scholarship to play football at Lenoir-Rhyne.
So it started out, I went to Western Carolina my freshman year.
Okay.
And I ended up going to a junior college, ASA. And originally wasn't to come to LR. Wasn't going to come to LR. I had a preferred walk on to Ole Miss. I had an opportunity to play at Temple and Marshall. And, Marshall was more scholarship, and then Temple was, they were debating. But those are the three schools I was kind of debating between. I studied accounting and finance. I was doing really, really well there. I got my associates in business administration accounting. But there was a misunderstanding with like transferring the classes. They thought the school wasn't accredited. All these different things happened. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have any more schools to go to. Like, there's only one credit off each one. And I was wondering why. So I called my friend who played with at Providence, who actually ended up playing at LR, Jaleel Roberts. And he and I said, hey, man, I'm just looking for a school to play football at. I know you're in North Carolina. How's everything going for you? And he said, oh, let me talk to the coaches. So it was when the Coach Shields and his staff were there. Mm-hmm. And they switched over the next year to the other coaching staff. But I called him and said, hey, man, I just want to find a school to play. So we talked and met. And then Coach C-Me, who's my man, he's a great guy. He came by my house, introduced himself to my family. And he said, why don't you come here and play at LR? I was like, for sure. And that's kind of how my Hickory story got started. So.
Did you play sports before your senior year? I mean, I know you boxed a little bit, or you were, or your mom wouldn't let you, so you weren't even doing that. Were you no sports at all before your senior year of high school?
No. So the only thing I ever got to do was I allowed to run track for one season of my life, and then I did hockey for one season of my life, like roller hockey. So, but my parents never it was like a little kid did, but I never really ever played a sport for more than a season. I was allowed to do anything, and then during my senior year, I snuck onto a wrestling match, like one match, and did that. That was fun. But my parents just never really were into it. And it's not because they hate sports. It's just when you grow up back in Congo, it's always about education. It's about the arts. So I grew up actually playing a lot of music. I went to an art school in South Florida. I was going to go to charter school, like a boarding school, like Connecticut, or art school in South Florida for high school. And then I thought I was going to go, play music in college and study the arts or study some other form of education, maybe like business or whatever, medicine, I don't know. But we moved to North Carolina and kind of things shifted for my family. So that's when I started like looking at sports and started seeing things. But my parents were going to let me. And it was just because they didn't know. But now they're the biggest sports fans in the world, and they're super, super supportive.
Well, I was going to ask, how did they react once you started playing football? Was it tough for them at first, or once they saw you, they got into it?
Well, I think at first it was tough because, my mom's a nurse and she's also my mother. So just seeing her kid get in there and just like you're running into people all the time.
Right.
That's tough. And I think too, just like understanding like what are the benefits of this? Like what does this do for your life? Back home, like in Congo, if you play sports, it's not like you have the opportunity to advance unless you're some superstar soccer player and you go to Europe, or you have to go play basketball, then you become like Dikembe Mutombo, but those are few and far between. And I think a lot of people just think it's unattainable. And for me, growing up in America, it's like African child, but in an American setting, I always saw people like, oh, they go to school for this, they have their school paid for, their opportunity to change their family's life. So for me, and I've always loved working out, I love fitness, but just sports weren't a thing I was allowed to do. Once they started seeing the benefits of it, they started seeing like, oh, this is actually something really cool. They fell in love with it instantly. They're always like, they call my teammates, they check on them. They support, they go to fights now. The fighting one was a different story. Yeah, that was just completely fun. I thought I was going to fight. But football-wise, they would drive up to games, whether I was on the bench or whether I was playing. They were ready to make it to it. So I appreciate them, and they're open. But the cool thing about that, being the first of three kids, it opened up the door for my brother, who plays at East Carolina. And my little sister, she plays volleyball, and she does really, really well, too. She's in high school.
So you had to crack that glass ceiling, and now your siblings are getting to benefit from it a little bit.
And that's to me, that's a blessing in itself.
No, for sure. So I read this somewhere, but I'll ask you the question. How many degrees do you have?
3. So I have an associate's in business administration accounting. I'm an bachelor's in accounting from LR. My finance, my bachelor in finance from LR as well.
So what drew you towards accounting and finance? I mean, you must be a math guy. I'm guessing that in Abu Dhabi, you're not talking derivatives with the guy in the locker room and stuff. So
No, well, so the funny thing is, you don't really have the choice when you're an African kid. So it's kind of like you got to become a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, businessman, something. So it was like I had an option, and I really wanted to do pre-med. That was from a little kid, I've always wanted to go to med school and do that, but my route changed, my life changed a little bit. So it wasn't like, but it's something that always interested me. Like I still love following medical journal pages and reading about. That's what kind of got me into fitness. But for me, it was those three options. You know, either became a doctor, really kind of for two. My parents really encouraged me to go to law school or anything like that. But became a doctor or go into accounting. My uncle, he's an awesome accountant. He's been doing really well. And I had an opportunity to live with him for a while, but also go see App State, where he went to school, and then I've seen his business, and he's done really well. And he just takes care of his family, so it was kind of interesting to me at the time, but it really wasn't my passion. At LR, all the professors were really cool, so it was like something that kept me engaged. Like just all those professors, they're just amazing. So for me, it's like I like the idea of having a business. I like the idea of running that, and I figured it was a good base for accounting and finance. So not necessarily a math guy, and I didn't think accounting was about math. To me, it's more about making the proper decisions to make the company grow. That's what I thought about it is.
Yeah, what a great comment. You know, listening to you talk, one of the things that we talk a lot about are the tools and resources that can help you be better than you would be on your own. And I think that's a little bit of what you're talking about here. I mean, especially the support that you clearly have gotten from your folks and your family. So you said so many things that bring up a million questions, but I'm going to table some of them because we could end up talking for 2 hours. I mean, one of the things I'm curious about is you were raised by folks that came from the Congo. You come from a different culture than a lot of American kids that you probably grew up with and spent a lot of time with. I'm guessing you probably noticed those differences and maybe still today. You know, I'm thinking about some of the things you had to go through. You wanted to play sports, your mom wouldn't let you. You knew you probably wanted to fight, but your folks said this isn't it right now. I think of teenagers that I know, they probably kick and scream and throw a tantrum and then push back on the education side because they're not getting this other thing. Clearly, you stayed on a pretty tight path, and that must come from the influence that come from your folks.
Yes, yeah, but my mom and dad are the best, man. I couldn't even tell you how much I love them. So it's like I always know they want the best for me and my brother and my sister, right? And I knew growing up here in American schools and then going to home, it just there was a certain barrier you had to get across. But one thing I love about my dad, like not many people, like even whether you're American, African, Asian, doesn't matter where, it's harder for sometimes young men to talk to their dads, right? It's always like that clash, right? But my dad, he's always open. Like he's the first one. He said, "I'll tell you if I'm wrong," and he'll always open with it. He corrects me for sure because he loves me, but he's never been the kind of guy to just dismiss me and not talk to him. So I can really talk to him about anything. Like he doesn't have how much I messed up. He just wants to help, and he's always been that way. And he didn't have that necessarily growing up. His dad was in the military, very strict, rigid man, but a loving man too. So for me, he's for us. He wanted to show us a lot of love and always there for us. Supports. You could hear him at every event, whether it's my sister's volleyball game match, my best basketball game, or my fights. You hear him louder than anybody else because he just wants to support us. So even the things they didn't necessarily pick up at first, like oh, we don't know about this. Once they're in it, they're in it.
Right.
And when it came to like school and my life, I always known that they want to advance me. So like I always thought about like to benefit my family and to honor them, I'm gonna do the best that I can. It's funny, like I always realize there's a way to, I guess it comes from accounting too. I guess it'll help me out. Like, there's a way to play a system. Like I knew that I needed to do this to get where I wanted to go. So the school's like, you don't need to do all these AP classes, but you need to get the best education to get, make the right connections, and learn how to work with people. And so I started an internship here in Charlotte called Avid Exchange, a financial technology company. Kind of doing it since I was 19. Started working there after college. But it was really huge because of the influence of my parents. Like, whatever you're in, you get the most out of it. And I think one thing I learned was that, like, the kids who do kick and scream, they just haven't seen life. or they haven't heard about it. Because my parents gave me a great, blessed me with a great life, but they never let me forget where I come from. My dad, he always tell me stories about how he grew up, and then the great moments, and then the challenging moments.
Right.
And those are kind of things that stuck in my mind. So I never really had like that rough upbringing. I didn't grow up in too much of a rough area. I always lived in a great home. I've been provided for. I never went a day without a meal. But my mom's always praying, my dad was teaching me, but they never just act like this is given to you. Like, it's like you have to go get it yourself. And it was definitely challenging. So that kind of made me, every time I was in school, like think, okay, I may not be playing sports yet. I may not even go to the NFL now, but I know I need to make the most out of it. I'm not going to dishonor my parents by being like lazy or slack. Whatever I do, I'm going to give them all for it.
Sure.
That's a huge influence from them.
Well, I was going to say it's a very mature thing to understand that your life is a process. It's not an event. You don't just go and become a UFC fighter. It doesn't work like that. You don't just go and become, a college level football player. You don't just go and become an accountant. Like, there's a process to everything. And sometimes the outcomes aren't always what you think they're going to be, but you understand the value of following a process. That also makes me think about that you're clearly not somebody that's afraid to get a little bit uncomfortable during that process. And so I'd love to hear the story of the day that you walked into Atlantic MMA. I'd love to hear the story of the day that you decided, I'm a football player, but I want to learn this. Tell me about that day.
So for sure. So I'm at LR, football starting back up for the summer, right? Summer ball, working. But I just kept watching these guys. And it's kind of like that this thing's calling me to do it. And I always pray that, God, this is what I need to do. Let's see it. So I watched the fight. I got out of my bed and I was like, we start looking at these MMA gyms, right? I didn't know what to look for. If it was just jiu-jitsu school, if it was a boxing place. And then Atlantic MMA, I said, what's nearby at least, right? Atlantic MMA. Drove over there. I met Mr. Statement. I said, hey, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the best at this. I want to learn. I'd like to be a part of it. Like, no disrespect, I just want to learn as much as possible. What do I need to do? And, they let me start coming to classes. And I would play. I would work. I'd go to practice. And then I'd go from football practice to jiu-jitsu or boxing, whatever they had that day. And Leslie, she was super helpful. And everybody who was there was just so helpful to me and really welcoming. And they just opened their arms to me and just let me learn. I didn't know what I was doing. I was getting beat up by people who were like literally 100 / almost maybe 200 pounds less than me. But I was like, okay, this is – so, yeah, it's definitely an uncomfortable feeling at first because you don't know what's going on. But I enjoyed it, too. I love the challenge. I love the ability, the opportunity to learn. Then a little bit of time there, and, they were super cool. There's a gym called Myrmidon in Statesville where a couple people from that gym were like cross-training with, and they invited me out there. A couple weeks later, they said, hey, do you want to fight? And I was like, sure. Right. And I said, we're going to fight. And they said that would be in made my pro debut January after I finished football. So I was learning how to cut weight. I was doing all that. And my amateur debut. And it was just like thing after thing. So it was always uncomfortable because I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't have any boxing background, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, Muay Thai, kickboxing.
You kind of went through that in football too, though, I'm guessing, is that you were surrounded by people that had probably been playing football since they were 6, 7 years old. And then you jumped in as a senior in high school. You're kind of doing the same thing now with fighting with what you're describing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of like, I also believe that God shows you something early in your life to let you know that you already have the lesson. You already have somewhat of a blueprint. So it actually started with me in music. When I started music, I went to the art school and I played guitar. But the Mr. Maloon, who was my band director at the time, he told me, he's like, if you want to do something special with music, you need to play tuba. And I said, tuba? Why would I play tuba? And I was a kid. I mean, I didn't know, and I just loved playing guitar. But he encouraged me to. He's like, the way, like your bass structure, not everybody has looks to play tuba, and I didn't even know about anything. So he encouraged me. He's like, you could do this orchestra, you can get scholarships. Not everybody has a skill set. And then, so I just kind of like dove deep into it. And I always have this need to be the best. So it kind of drives me, it makes me obsessed with it. So I was like, when I was a kid, I would just play. And I actually got so much into music, I would forget about my other classes. My parents would get on me all the time. So like, when I dive into it, I'm like, everything else didn't matter. So then I knew, like, if I want to do well in this and excel and got awesome rewards, got to play with certain high schools and different orchestras when I was a kid, it taught me, like, it doesn't matter when you start. It depends how much obsessed you are when you do it, how disciplined you So I went from there, and the kind of same thing happened to football, happened to MMA, and I really feel like this is where God's called me to be. But it's like, to me, it's like, if you took away fighting tomorrow, I'm grateful because I know every day that I've never like pulled back. I mean, of course, I love it, and be like, oh man, what do I do now? But He's never failed me, right? So it's never been like that issue for me. So kind of lets me have that freedom to keep training. Went from that gym, gym closed down, and I found gym where I am now. And man, talking about the first days there, getting whooped
Really?
on. Just like you're just like, huh, this is that uncomfortable feeling you need, though, right? You want those guys who are always pushing you, challenging you, and some of you guys have fights. And my head coach at Jimmo, like a second dad, he he's like, I asked him, hey, I'm coming here to fight. And he's like, have you ever trained before? Pretty much. And I'm like, not really. But I just kind of, this time my first amateur fight. He's like, nah, for your first year, you're gonna help your training partners and serve. So every day I did as many classes as I could. And when guys had fights, I'd be in the sessions and just training to help them. It helped me out a lot, right? And then over time, you just kept obsessing over it. Left the accounting job. That was a whole crazy situation. Came back from work to my parents. So I got a promotion. I'm not taking it. I'm going back to Harris Teeter. And then I was bouncing at nights, but I don't want to tell them until they get worried. So I was catering.
Right. Oh, you didn't want to tell them about bouncing, but now you had to tell them that you were doing combat sports.
Yeah, full time. Because they went to my first amateur fight when I was in college,
that.
but after that they came. And I'm telling you, that was just a day. But the most awesome thing is like where we are now. They're like praying, cheering me on for fights, having watch parties, because of COVID, right?
Right.
They are super supportive, and it just means a lot to me. It always lets me know to like the sacrifice we make way back when, or the day we make that choice. It's like, am I doing the right thing, God? So I got to trust you. And then all of a sudden, I'm blessed to be doing what I love full time, right? So now being the UFC, I'm so looking forward to my next fight, hopefully in end of December / January, February.
Yep.
And like the fight that I'm gonna have will be better than I've ever had before. So it just kind of makes me like inspired, right?
Let's talk about that for a second. So you go, you start training. Eventually, do you get invited to the Contender Series? How does that work?
Yeah, so you get invited. So last year, I've been on the Contender Series twice.
Right.
Last year, I fought this show called King of the Cage in South Carolina. Had a pretty cool knockout. Then like dropped the guy. Then I choked him out. And just like it was like crazy like finish, like flying knee and just all this stuff. So like they were like, oh, this is cool, and then just started going anywhere. And my teammate Brian Barbarino, who's actually managed me at the time, helped me out, and he like texted those guys like, hey, look at this kid. This kid needs to fight the UFC. Let's get a short notice, whatever. And they said, no, we're trying to get you guy on the Contender Series. So I got invited.
And hold that thought. For those that don't know, the Contender Series is a UFC sponsored series. Dana White, and generally, as I understand it, whoever wins the Contender Series typically gets a contract.
Yeah. So for sure, yes, sir. So what happens is you fight that night, you get the contract usually. But I fought the first night. Fought one of the best prospects in the country and the world, Kalen Hill, who was knocking people out like 5s, 10, 11, just dropping people. And we won the fight unanimously. Thinking we have the contract and running around the back, like, let's go. Woo. Get in the back, and Dan's like, Mr. White says, no, I have some questions. Come back next year, fight some more fights. And after that, that's when I guess the challenge started. 6 fights fell through throughout the year. When I had 6 fights within 8 months, or within 7.5, almost 8 months. Then the other half of the year, nothing. Then when I finally get a fight, I got an acute kidney failure. I ended up getting sick. Nothing to do with my weight cut. I was pretty close to weight. Then I get another fight offer for the LFA middleweight title. Super excited about that. COVID starts. And literally that weekend was when they canceled the travel ban. And I was like, come on. So literally almost a whole year. Then I get offered the second Contender Series fight September 1st. I'm working out. What's the picture of the UFC? He's like, are you ready to fight now? Call me for August 11th of this year. So August 11th comes. I get my second Contender Series fight. Claim that victory. Didn't finish the fight, so I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, we were looking for the finish. We want to get this. We think we finished the fight. They say it's a low blow, like whatever. And then all of a sudden, Dana White says, hey, yes, he let this kid already accepted the fight. But what happened was the UFC gave up my number on accident. And I didn't know. I was getting all these phone calls, so I didn't know my agent was calling me too. So the UFC's offering you a fight no matter what, whether you get the contract tonight, whether you get it tonight or not. One of the matchmakers wants to offer you a fight, will you take it? But I told my agent, if I don't answer the phone, just tell them I said yes, I'll take any fight.
Right.
So what happened was he said, Impa says yes, don't worry about it. I said, are you sure? Like, Impa says yes, he'll be just fine. And that's when I made my debut. So it was like a whirlwind of a year, but really a whirlwind of blessing.
No, that's pretty amazing. I mean, and you never lost during that period of time, but yet it must have felt like a little bit of a loss when after that first series, you didn't get the contract. Like some people may have crumbled under that a little bit, like the world's out to get me, or, why me? I mean, clearly you don't have that kind of personality, but how do you, well, I'm going to hold this question. I have a question about failure, but let's come back to it. Okay, so you get your contract. When was the first time you went to Abu Dhabi?
First time I went to Abu Dhabi was this past fight, whenever I went for the October 10th fight.
Okay, gotcha. And I saw the fight, and a lot of I'm watching these fights, and I'm thinking about where you are. I mean, you're had you ever been out of the country?
I've been out of the country a few times when I was a kid. I traveled to Europe, South Africa, North Africa, Canada, but never in the Middle East or anywhere in that region of the world.
What was it like? I'm curious your experience in Abu Dhabi, and I'm curious about how you were treated, hospitality, culture, and also the precautions that were taken considering COVID.
Well, the UFC is top notch for sure. We had so many COVID tests. We go to Vegas first. We quarantine at this hotel, Holiday Inn Suites on Rainbow Boulevard. And the cool thing about that one, actually, that hotel, the same hotel that I stayed in when I first fought in the Contender Series. And I remember I first thought I got the contract, came back, and it was super, like, just sitting in that hotel sad. Like, man, I thought it never hurt so much to win a fight, to claim victory. I remember sitting in the hotel, I was like, watching what would come after this. It was interesting because the hotel we stayed at this time, before we flew out to Abu Dhabi, was the same one that I stayed on the first Contender Series. The second Contender Series and my UFC debut, Vegas this year, were at another hotel, the Residence Inn Marriott. So something was significant about that hotel for me. And I was like, oh, that's weird. We're not there. I saw all the fighters and all the embedded series and behind the scenes. They were leaving from the Residence Inn. I wondered why we're here. But it just happened to time out by the time I was fighting in Abu Dhabi that we were in the Holiday Inn. And I just remember saying, like, man, I remember last time I came to the Holiday Inn, I didn't get my contract. But last time I came, my dad would always tell me, in order to get to it, you got to go through it. Before you know my glory, you must first understand my story. And what's super significant about this trip is that my dad courted me for the first time ever. So he's never really been in the combat sports, never been in the sports, super, like, he called himself a nerd, just loves engineering, loves all that stuff. But he was never into it. But the biggest honor I had, probably one of the biggest honors I had in my fight career, is my dad cornered me for the first time. He flew with me overseas to Abu Dhabi, was in the corner, did the whole process. It was a real big privilege to have him there. And just after, like, everything I tell you, like, oh my gosh, you're fighting, why are you doing this? Like, when I first started fighting too, they would still tell people I'm an accountant. So I was like, so for him to have the and my dad's a very private man, so for him to have the pride and the joy to come with me and be a part of the process, I brought him. The UFC treated him like he was the fighter. Like, they're just the best.
That's great.
So we're at that hotel, and I was thinking, like, man, I remember the last time I was here. Flew into Abu Dhabi, and they were the best treatment I've ever had. Like, they took it, like, escorted from the airport to the hotel. We're celebrating when you get in there. Whatever you needed for your room, they got you. They had us. Whatever you needed, they were like, oh, what do you need? We had free food. We had whatever. You didn't even feel like you were in quarantine. It was just like all expense paid vacation, but you get a fight. So that's like the best kind of vacation. And it was just a great experience. And some people really influential in my life there. Brian Marina, Diego Costa. It was a really cool story too. And just, it was wonderful. The UFC was like, whatever you need, we have you. My weight was great. So, like, the UFC scouts was giving me a lot of information. Dr. Real, Dr. Tara, who did a lot of my physical therapy through fight week, just to keep me, primed me ready to go for my fight. It's super, super awesome. And just the whole staff, like the UFC staff, is what keeps it running. So it really, really meant a lot.
So you enjoyed Abu Dhabi. I've seen some pictures from I think there was you in the water at one point, and it looks like outside of the fact that you got to keep your game face on because you still have a job to do, that it was probably a pretty good time. I was curious about hospitality and how the folks over there treat not just the UFC family, but even outside of that. But it sounds like it was nothing but positive.
The hotel staff, you have the W in Abu Dhabi. The hotel, the W, they might have one like in South Florida as well. The hotel is amazing. And it's on a Formula One racetrack and a marina. So it's like a Formula One racetrack and a marina. The hotel's on top of that. And it's one of the best tracks. So it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, you got to see a lot of stuff for sure. How so that last experience and your dad was there. First little bit of adversity maybe for you in your career?
In a way, right? Like, so it's funny to say it's the first little bit of adversity. Maybe in a fight, I lost the fight. I didn't perform how I needed to, and I got hit with a great kick. I mean, I lost the fight. So it wasn't the first bit of adversity. Like I think people think like, oh man, like he's never lost before. So it's like, how's he gonna take it? For me, it's like, man, I've lost so much. I failed a test before, right? I've been in trouble with my parents. I fell short in my faith, my walk with God. Like I've fallen short many times, right? So I didn't go to the NFL. I didn't go to, but I always realized to become better from that. Like in practice, getting whooped, and you're just like, I gotta get better today.
Right.
And that for me was one of those moments. At first, I was like, man, dang. Like first, I was like, what happened? Because you're knocked out. You're like, dang. You wake up and you're good. I'm healthy. I'm blessed. I'm with my dad. I was like, man, I'm sorry. I wish I performed better for sure. And that was my goal, and I will from this point on. But what I kind of, we were talking about before, when I was at the hotel, the Holiday Inn, not the Residence Inn, where I had my UFC debut and my second Contender Series. I was being at the hotel. I was like, it's funny that I'm here, and that we're leaving from. It's like, what a story. Like, you tell me last year that I'd be going from this same hotel to Abu Dhabi, I might have been just like, okay, like by faith, but also too like you're crazy. When I came back, we came back and they quarantined us in the hotel late through the night in the Holiday Inn, and then we take the charter. We take our regular flights back to our home state. We don't fly from Abu Dhabi. We fly back to Vegas, and then we fly, in this case, North Carolina. I remember later, and they put us all in different rooms so we don't possibly spread COVID if somebody had it. Sitting in the bed, and I just remember just thinking, like, I'm not going to shed a tear. I went for a long walk and just prayed and thought about it, talked to my family, and I was like, man, like, watch what I become after this. That's what I'm going to do. Not because I remember last year on the Contender Series, oh man, I cried so hard, and I was like, man, like, how in the world? And then God showed me, he's like, look what came after that. Look what came after you fell short the first of the Contender Series. You had a great performance. And like, not that I was fighting terribly this past fight. It's just like, I know I can do better. So there's a quote I love. He says, when are you going to demand the best of yourself? And what will you do? And it just gives this whole explanation, speaking to Olympians. And like the first thing when he's talking about Socrates and all this stuff, it's like, what will I become? So for me, it was like, I just went for this walk, and I was like, part of you is hurting, part of you is angry, part of you is like, what in the world? But I just remember this isn't the first time I failed. It's like, I've messed up in practice. I've messed up in, all that stuff matters. Like, if you treat the fight as deep as you treat practice, right? Or you treat practice as deep as you treat the fight, whether you fail in the fight, you fail in practice, it's going to mean the same way. But the opportunity to own the failure gives the opportunity to own the change.
Okay, say that again. That was great.
So for me, it was like I always tell myself, like, I have the opportunity to own the failure, so I get the opportunity to own the change. Like,
yeah, I love that.
So I'm not seeking comfort. Like if everybody says like, oh my gosh, it's this crazy kick and you got caught with it, then I stop there, right? You kind of give yourself that excuse to say, oh, whatever, there's nothing to learn from it. But I know I've been taught to lean back on the kicks. I know I've been taught to let it go earlier. I know I've been taught to put different action on the kicks. And the laziness in the fight, the opponent, Joaquin Buckley, he capitalized on it, right? Now, it'd been wonderful if I saw it. It'd been wonderful, whatever, then maybe the fight keeps going. But I'm not going to live in the what if this didn't happen, right? I'm living the what if I come back and I become that much better from this? What if I come back and somebody tries that again when I fight the guys like Robert Whitaker, he doesn't know how to side you, when I have the middleweight belt? What if I fight one of the best Taekwondo guys in the world and I just remember that, hey, I remember what happened in that defeat or in that loss. What will I become from that? So for me, it was like, I remember I got to the hotel. I was like, you remember what happened last year when you first fought the Contender Series? You didn't get the contract, it hurt. But this time, we don't have any tears to cry anymore. Now you got to get better. Now you got to come back home and treat people properly. Of course, it's on my brain, and I thought about it. It's really, really quiet. And, I hate losing. I love winning. But I realized, too, I'm not going to live in that negative mental space, right? I have the power I have the power to move forward from that. So I said, hey, I got to move forward. And I just came right back to the gym. The UFC is great. They sent the PI and Charles and Dr. Real, they sent me a post, knockout protocol just to make sure, okay, man, no concussion, I'm healthy, I'm blessed, and I get to fight again. And when I fight again, finishing that fight, dominate that fight. Like, I just have that in my brain to do it, by faith, go get it, and fight barbarously, right? I think if you look at this year, why do you need to give up after 2020? It was like, what a 2020 year. What this, what that. But what can you become? There's been people who started businesses in the middle of COVID. There's people who've been taking care of their families. So I'm like, I'm not going to sit here. But I've also seen my parents' story. Coming from Congo, my dad came to America with $12 in his pocket. Like, you don't think he had a bad day. You don't think he had some tough day. Like, I plan to get married one day. I plan to have kids one day. I plan to have a family. Like, I'm not going to let my kids see me where I failed and then say, oh, dad was like, he was mad. He's cursing all over TV. He's yelling. He's insulting these fighters. He's saying all this stuff. I would show them how you carry yourself, even if you fail a test in school, even if you do this. Like, I have my little brother and my sister. I'm not going to show them like, oh, yeah, I failed on the international stage, so you guys get to act terribly. If anything, you have to comport yourself the best you can, right?
And it's a waste of energy also, right? I mean, you clearly understand. And look, it's easy for me to say these things. And I think a lot of times I enjoy coaching people up. Actually, I really enjoy it, but that doesn't mean it's not. I can say something that's still really hard for me, right? To see the opportunity in failure, to be able to understand that failure has to happen. How do we get to the place where we can ultimately be if we don't have these little events that happen along the way? It goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier, the difference between the process, some people say the journey, and these events that happen. You're not defined by these events, but, boy, thank your parents for me when you see them at some point, because they've really helped to create someone who at a really young age understands the value of the process and not just this singular event. You actually looked at that and said, like Jocko says, right? Good. That just happened.
Yeah,
I needed it
that's
to
actually
happen.
one of my favorite phrases. I kind of adopted that for my training. So where you ask like, oh, his first bit of adversity. No, when I was training with guys like John Salter and guys would come to the gym and I wouldn't know what I was doing. I remember being so mad after training one day. I was like, man, you can't do this. Like, if you're going to do this for the rest of your life and you're going to be angry, it's not going to affect your home life well. I said, so every day, there's no such thing as a bad day in training. It's a good day. It's a solid day, right? And I said, I'm going to make this good. So, hey, you threw me? I just started laughing. And they were like, and then you realize you start laughing. As you improve, everything's joyful, right? I said, man, like I look at this opportunity as a challenge, right? As a man, I'm like, okay, cool. You got knocked out. They say it's one of the best knockouts in UFC history. But how cool of a story will it be is when I start having the best knockouts that people will never think they've seen before. First round, second
That's
round,
right.
Crazy fight. They're just like, how did it become so dominant after the failures? Because I owned it. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it with pride. I'm gonna say what I become. Then when I start finishing fights, spectacularly, whatever the right word is, right? They're like, how in the world did that happen? I'm like, I was inspired by what I felt. And it's what's it Edison he says, I found out so many ways not to make a light bulb. I found out one way not to fight, right? So for me, it's like, well, watch what I become now. Watch what I'm willing to do. Watch me dive so deep into the process, I learned how to create something new. A great wrestler said that. His name was John Smith. He won the Olympics 4 years, 4 of them. Then I don't know, he's a few-time Olympic champion. He won the 6 world championships. So when it wasn't the Olympic year, he was winning the world championship, which is pretty much the Olympics. And when it was Olympic year, he won. But when it changed for him, he lost a match to a guy from Cuba. And at that time, Cuba didn't have a great wrestling program like the United States did. And he sat there and he was talking to the guys at Nike. And he's one of the greatest college wrestling coaches still to this day. But what it came from it was he failed. He sat there and he's like, man, what did he do? He was already sponsored by Adidas. He was already at the highest level. He says, going back to the World Championships, second place isn't an option. For me, it's like failure is not an option. Falling short is not an option. When the next fight after that, like my personal goal for myself is like whatever I need to do now on the front end process is what I need to become and challenge myself to become something special. So I thought about that. How do you dive deep in the process? That's become like my new path for myself. Like, what do I need to do to become something that's special? And what he did after that, he created a new technique in wrestling, the low single leg. So I said, well, that's John Smith's moment. What can I have? Like learning that from him. It's been done before. He's fallen short, and that's what I think advances people. When you just look at that place, like kind of like that place you get a clean slate. That's why I cut my hair. I actually didn't mean to cut my beard. So like, the barber misunderstood.
You didn't mean to.
No, but I was like, a mistake
in the bathroom.
Yeah, I was like, no. So because but I say it's a fresh, clean slate. Like to become a better individual at what you are called to do, like to me, it's fighting, software, whatever it is. I think a lot of it's closely related to becoming a better man, becoming a better person. Like
the process is so transferable. Like if that's your mentality, it is transferable into other things. It's transferable into getting your degree. It's transferable into not being afraid to walk into a building. Look, man, when you went from playing football, good looking guy, all cut up, really good football player, and you walk into this gym and you're the low guy on the totem pole now. Most people like to stay on that perch and not put themselves in a position where they're going to be viewed as someone that doesn't know what they're doing or looks a little bit silly or foolish along the way. That's not just sports. Look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So I compare everything to sports. All analogies to me are sports analogies because that's how I came up. But it is transferable. It's transferable into business. It's transferable into your family, how you treat your spouse, how you work with your children. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all along the way, but your ability to see the opportunity in those things is what makes you awfully special. And I'll say I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll break because I know you're busy. I think you're probably still icing your foot there. I don't want your foot to fall off.
No, you're great. The machine actually readjusts to like your body temperature. It's really
okay.
Cool. My friend Matt Spalding said it to me. It's called the Jet Stream.
Oh, you go.
Yeah, it's really. I don't know. I'll have to show you later, but it's like a super cool thing, and it's just like I sleep with it and helps me out because I hurt I kicked somebody, caught their elbow yesterday, and so my foot started swelling up, and it was able to help me like train right away the next day. So
you could just keep that thing on and let it go. Okay, yeah, so all of that is transferable, and it gets me excited. Here's one of the things I'll also say before I ask you one more question. After that last fight, I saw the Instagram post that you put out. Actually, I didn't see it. My wife saw it. I'm not very good on Instagram, so she follows things and she'll send me things that she knows that I'll like. And so Nikki sent me the post where you commented on the kick. And my immediate reaction was I texted Jonathan Stamey and I said, I want to meet Impa. I want him on the podcast. This is a buy low moment for me because you're a star. And in 2 months from now, you're not going to take my text message or go on the
please.
podcast.
No, of course I would.
But I said, look, man, number one, I've enjoyed following him. But this Instagram post proves what a special guy he is. And I would love the opportunity to get his story out a little bit, maybe to people that don't watch MMA, but can completely relate to some of the things that you just shared. So thank you for being who you are. Thank you for sharing what you just shared. I have one quick question before we break though. Tell us about your nickname and what it means.
Oh man, so my nickname, fight name is Chilobo, and it comes from my faith and my culture. So on my first amateur fight, I told my dad, I said, I have to come up with a fight name. I don't know. I already got my walkout song. It's the Call Upon the Lord from a church, Elevation Worship. I got it. But I don't know what I want to use my fight name. But I want something that represents being Congolese, being Congolese American, proud to be American, proud to be Congolese, but also want something that represents God and my faith because I prayed and I said, hey, I wouldn't be fighting if I didn't know that God called me to do this. And I wouldn't be fighting if I wasn't blessed to somehow start meeting the right people who've helped me advance, right? So it's just like, I'm grateful. So my dad said, okay, we're thinking, we're actually sitting here in the kitchen. Him and my mom, for some reason, we're up late at night cooking. That's we have family coming over. It's like around the holidays. And he's like, okay, what could it be? What could it be? He starts saying, well, I want something like so deep. So it's from his original language, which is Chiluba, which almost sounds like my fight name. But it's a native tongue back in Congo. And there's so many languages there. My dad speaks Lingala, Chiluba, Swahili, Kikongo, French, and English.
Wow.
So he has all these languages. So for me, and I think at the time he was speaking Portuguese too, and I think he still knows a little bit of it. But the thing is, I just wanted to represent them for what they've done, right? And Chiloba is what came, and that means mighty warrior under God, right? So like that's kind of how it is for me. It just kind of reminds me of, you know who you are, you don't have to act like anybody else. You know who you are, you kind of you know how to act even when you fall short, right? And my dad, super cool thing he did. I walked out for the first time with the Congolese flag and the American flag for a fight. Mm-hmm. And I brought it to the UFC and I had two of them, like, oh, you have to have them sewn together. And I was like, I don't have to sew. And my dad's like, I got you. But the cool, significant part about that for me is that he's the one who came to America and his family followed and someone around the world. But he's the one who sewed it together. And, you know, if you take the metaphor, or whatever it is, the metaphor, he sewed it together, sewed my flag, and the UFC approved it. And I got to walk out with it. And like for me, it's like to hold his flag and hold our flags, which just meant a lot to me. So it's like something I always cherished. But it was just a huge honor to represent them, represent my family, and represent God the best that I could, right? And that's always my challenge. Like, so whenever you fall short, you got to remember who you are and whose you are. And whenever you do well, too, you have to remember who you are and who you are. And my head coach, Jeff Jimbo, he used to have this poem called If by Rudyard Kipling. And it says, if you can treat triumph and disaster the same, then it finishes out and says, you become a man, my son. And I just always remember that. Like, when the day I get the championship belt, I'll probably cry and be happy for sure and say, here you go. But even the day I fell short, I'm going to keep moving forward and treat it the same so I can grow from it, right? That's what it was for me. So
that's a great story. Great way to tie all this together as well. Well, look, man, you have a lot of fans that you don't know about that you've earned along this journey, this process so far. And if along the way there's anything I can do or anybody back close to your hometown can do to help you out, you just ask. You've earned whatever support we can provide to you. But you great tips today. We wish you nothing but the best. We're going to end this, but don't go anywhere because you have one more favor. You have one more favor to do for me. We'll keep private and off the podcast. But Impa, man, thanks for coming on The Walk, and we wish you all the best. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me on. God bless.
All right, bud.